Since abortion was legalized, nearly 47 million unborn babies have died. That also means 47 million mothers have experienced abortion. What's happening to them? Today, I want to give you an up-close and personal glimpse into the lives of women who chose abortion and now must live with the pain and grief it's brought them. There are those who say abortion doesn't psychologically affect women. After hearing their personal stories, you decide.
After about a year of being in college, I wound up pregnant. And I just thought that was the easy way out, to have an abortion. I talked to one girl, one of my best friends, and she said, oh, it's easy, just have an abortion. That's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear the easy way out. And so I made the appointment, and she took me against my boyfriend's wishes. He begged me not to have an abortion. She took me on March 29th, 1985. And I remember that date so well in my mind because it was the day my life changed forever.
When I made my abortion decision, abortion had been legal for a few years, and I'd had a few friends who had made an abortion decision. So I had fought for a woman's right to abortion when I was in college. I was very liberal. I wrote papers about a woman's right to choose. I picketed and stood up for a woman's right to choose abortion. So, you know, it never really was that much of a deep heart thought process when I made the abortion decision. I just decided I do not want to have a child, you know, and not be married, and so it was kind of a matter-of-fact decision.
I was 18 years old. I was starting my sophomore year of college, and when I first found out that I had the possibility of being pregnant, of course I was overwhelmed and shocked. I couldn't believe it actually happened. And I told my best friend at the time, and the only place that we knew to go to was a Planned Parenthood organization that was down the road. So I set up an appointment, and I went to talk with them. They, of course, confirmed the pregnancy. And I remember the counselor asking me, so how do you feel about being pregnant? And the words I remember saying was, I do not want to be pregnant. And then the next question she asked me was, well, what about the father? And at that moment I lied. That's when the lies really began. And I said, well, I can't really tell the father because if I tell him, he'll just want to get married and have a baby, and we're not in love, and I just don't want to go on that road. So it's better for me just to make the decision on my own. And she said, so an abortion? I said, yes.
How did the first 12 months go for you emotionally after that then?
After that, the choices I made were horrible. I dropped out of school immediately. I never made it past, you know, it wasn't long after that, and I lost my job. I quit my job because I would just not go to work.
So it was a downhill slope.
Oh, it was bad.
Right away then, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And then I ended up moving back home, and no one knew, and they just thought I was lost for a while. I was lost for a while.
I felt relieved. It's like it would come into my mind again, and I would remember, oh, I'm not pregnant anymore. I don't have that problem anymore. And it made me so happy for a couple of days. As I went through, you know, just the next few weeks or the next few months or whatever, I kind of described that time in my life as the blinders being removed. It was like I finally saw exactly what I had done. And it was a horrendous realization in my life. And it was at that point that I started doing anything I could to just keep my mind numb.
I had married my fiance, and we had a very, very bad marriage. I just kind of shut down my emotions for the next 7 years, but I never really connected it back to the abortion. I just knew that I was a miserable woman and that nothing was working in my life.
I knew inside I was going crazy. And after living like this, I would say probably 2 years, I decided that the only way out was to take my own life. And so I planned the day, I planned the method. My roommate at the time, I knew that she kept a pistol in her nightstand drawer. And I say it was a hard decision to make, but it really wasn't a hard decision because all I was focused on was my pain and myself and how awful life had become. And I felt like that was my only way out. So like I said, I planned the day, I planned the method. I went to work that day and just told everybody I was sick. I lied to everybody so I could go home early because I knew my roommate would be at work. And so I drove home from work that day, and that's another vivid memory I have, driving home from work knowing everything was so familiar to me, but I knew that's the last time I'm going to see that. This is the last time I'm going to drive my car. Everything was the last time. And by the time I got home, I was so sad because of what I was doing. I knew life was about to end for me.
When we return,
I remember that the barrel of that gun going right between my eyes and sitting there not believing that my life had come to this.
Facing life.
Whether you're a student needing answers, a parent needing help, or a concerned citizen wanting to make a difference, Life Issues Institute has the resources you need to put your values into action. Life Issues Institute is an international educational organization committed to protecting innocent human life. Life Issues Institute knows what it takes. That's why millions throughout the world turn here for help. Life Issues Institute has authored more pro-life publications than any other entity in the world, and its materials are printed in over 30 languages. Radio broadcasts, newsletters, and a website filled to the brim with the answers you're looking for are just a click away. Go to facinglife.tv and click on the link to Life Issues Institute to find out more about how you can change the heart of a nation.
In college, Sheila Harper chose to have an abortion. Soon after, she slipped into a vicious cycle of alcohol and drug abuse, which led her to the decision to end her life.
I went home, I got her pistol out of the nightstand drawer, I took it to the couch in our living room. I sat up on the edge of the couch and I literally turned the gun around and put the butt of the gun against my fingers, and I put my thumbs on the trigger, and I leaned over and I put the barrel of that gun between my eyes, and it was like, still another vivid memory. I remember that the barrel of that gun going right between my eyes and sitting there not believing that my life had come to this. I was 20 years old. And it was just a very painful time. But I sat there and I kept saying, just do it, because I was so terrified of actually pulling the trigger. And we had these dusty old hardwood floors in this apartment that we lived in. And I remember seeing my tears just splashing on those dusty floors as I was leaned over there and saying, just do it. And I was too afraid to really pull the trigger, so I started pulling the trigger real slowly, and I knew that I wouldn't know when the bullet released. And I thought, okay, I can do that. I won't consciously make the decision and pull the trigger now. I'll just be unconscious. And so I sat there not breathing and pulling the trigger very slowly, waiting on it to be over. And it was literally in that moment I heard tires outside on the gravel driveway outside our apartment, and I knew no one was supposed to be home. So I jumped up and ran to the window and looked out, and it was my roommate home in the middle of the day. It was literally the first time I had thought that this would terrorize her to walk into that apartment and find me in that condition. It was really the first time I had ever had that thought, because when you're contemplating suicide, it is such a selfish thing. It is you are so focused on yourself and your pain that you don't realize anything else going on around you. And I literally did not realize anything about her and how this might affect her. So at that moment, I ran, put her gun back in her nightstand drawer, jumped in my bed in my room and laid down, shut the door so she couldn't see me because I was just a mess. I laid there literally for the rest of the day and the whole next day thinking, I didn't know what to do at that point. How am I still going to deal with this? I didn't plan anything past that day because I thought I wouldn't be there.
When was the turnaround? When did you see that glimmer of hope?
When I ended up getting reconnected with my husband, once we got back together, he gave me that security that I was longing for. It wasn't always a healthy relationship, but when we got married and I became pregnant again, and it was then when I started realizing, wow, when I had that first sonogram at 9 weeks, I looked at that sonogram and I could not believe what I was seeing. I was pregnant with a child, and she had a beating heart, and she had arms and legs, and she was beautiful, and that's when the tears started to flow.
I did go on to have another child and another son, and when I found out I was pregnant, my husband brought home this beautiful color book, all color book of the development of the unborn child. And I remember opening the book and looking at, like a 10-week fetus or something, and shutting the book down, putting it down, and never picking it up again until many, many years later. So I had a lot of just stuff going on that I had no idea, it certainly never connected it with an abortion experience, just connected it with hating the world and especially hating him.
Was there any point where you connected the dots, where you realized this abortion was the cause of your emotional problems?
There was a time where I did connect the dots. It started when my boyfriend broke up with me, and I knew the rejection was because of the abortion. And that's when I made a conscious decision that I was going to lock that secret away for the rest of my life, so I would never have to deal with rejection like that again. And then when the nightmare started was another time that I realized this has really affected me in a bad way. And that's when I connected everything together, because the nightmares, it was so obvious that it was something to do with my abortion, because all of the dreams, all of the nightmares had to do with my stomach, something coming out of my stomach. My boyfriend was always in the dream, and I knew that was the cause of them, and I knew that was the cause of all my problems, because I didn't have any of those problems before March 29th. It all started after March 29th.
March 29th was the day Sheila had her abortion. The Elliott Institute recognizes flashbacks, nightmares, or intrusive thoughts depicting their abortion experience as symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. When we come back, we'll meet an accomplice to abortion and hear how it impacted her life. Mary Comm is the author of the book, Secret Sin When God's People Choose Abortion. She wrote it after recognizing the role she played in a friend's choice to abort her child.
I was an accomplice to an abortion. I was probably 21 years old, and my best friend was in a crisis pregnancy. And I was probably only one of 2 people she told. And at that time, I was so afraid of wounding our friendship that I didn't tell her what I believed in my heart, and that was that abortion was wrong. So I kind of dusted my hands and I said, whatever she decides, I'll support her in it, fully thinking that she would choose life, and she did not. So she called me on the phone one day. I was living in another state at the time, and she told me she'd made the appointment for the abortion, and I felt like somebody had kicked me in the stomach. But all I could think to say was, do you want me to come home and take you to the clinic? Even knowing how I was opposed to it and felt about it. She told me no, that she would find somebody else to take her, and she did. And it really affected our relationship anyway. It changed our relationship forever. Not too long after the abortion, she had had a nervous breakdown and spent 2 weeks in a psychiatric unit. And I moved on with my life and, got married and had children of my own. And she was still at that point in such a self-destructive cycle, and her life was going in a different direction. She was having affairs with married men and using drugs and alcohol, and we just kind of went our separate ways.
What kind of a burden did that place on your shoulders after you thought about your role in that abortion?
I've always struggled with my role in that abortion because, I mean, growing up we were very good friends, and her family was kind of like my second family, and I knew that I had been a party to taking away her parents' first grandchild. And so I knew that that had affected the whole family, and that loss is still there today.
We often realize that couples who experience abortion normally break up, but your experience is evidence that there's a ripple effect to abortion, and it affects other relationships of those involved. How far do you think that rippling effect goes out?
I think it affects every relationship from then on. I counseled one woman that from my old hometown a few years ago that she had taken her sister for an abortion, and because of the situation they invited her into the abortion room, and she saw the entire procedure, and she's very traumatized by that. So I think even families where they don't know that there's an abortion present in the past, that it affects them. I know one family that they don't know that their parents had an abortion, but it has affected the way that their mother parented, even to the point that when she had grandchildren, she couldn't bond with her grandchildren.
So it can affect generation after generation.
Exactly.
Coming up, Sheila, Carla, and Pat reveal how they moved on with their lives and found healing.
Facing life. Facing life. Facing life.
What was the turning point for you?
I feel like this just sounds so shallow, but I met a guy that was a really nice guy, and I couldn't get over that he liked me and he was paying attention to me. I ended up cleaning myself up enough to get married. We were married a year and a half before I told him about the abortion, and I knew as soon as I told him that he was going to leave me, he was going to divorce me. He didn't. He sat there and cried like a baby and said, now we know how to help you, because I was literally just, he never knew what he was going to come home to, if I was going to be drunk or if I was going to be happy or if I was going to be laying in the bed crying, depressed. It was literally like a roller coaster ride at our house. But when I told him, and he just took me in his arms and loved me and said, I will never leave you.
How did that affect your relationship then after you told him?
Well, he began to really search for help. He didn't know where to go for help, and I certainly didn't know. I thought there was probably nobody else in the world that was suffering like I was, because you keep it such a secret that you think you're literally the only one. And then, of course, what we hear from the media and outlets such as that it's a good choice for women. It's, you have that right. If it's ever taken away from you, that's a bad thing. And so to hear that being told to me and what was going on in my mind, it just did not compute. I had no idea why was I feeling so bad if this was such a good right for me that they're telling me. I started looking for help. We couldn't find anything. We didn't know where to go.
Where did this journey begin then to hope and healing?
I was driving down the road one day and had my children in the car and had a Christian radio station on, which was odd for me at the time. I had that on, and they advertised a class. The local pregnancy center in the town I was living in advertised a class for women. I'll never forget what they said, the wording, for women who have had an abortion and are suffering afterwards. It described me perfectly.
At what point, Carla, did you connect the dots? Did you figure out that these emotions and this destructive behavior are related to this past abortion?
It wasn't until I was driving in a car and I was listening to Focus on the Family on the radio, and Dr. Dobson was doing a program on sanctity of human life. And I remember I was just starting to get back, going to church and trying to figure out, what it is that I'm missing in my life. And I heard him say, I know there are women who've had an abortion that are listening to me today. And now I thought, oh my goodness, I didn't know that other people knew, And he goes, I want you to know that you are loved.
One day I'm riding along in my car very soon after I became a Christian, and I was listening to a show a lot like this I had turned my rock station, radio station, over to Christian radio. And I was listening to this radio station, and there were these two women who'd had abortions talking to the host about the abortions in their past. I was just hearing myself all over that radio show. So that was pretty much my first acknowledgement after 7 years that abortion had affected my life.
We've seen about 47 million abortions since it was legalized in 1973. That's a lot of women who are walking wounded. How should we interact with people around us then, knowing that more than likely we all know somebody who's been directly involved with abortion?
One of the things that I talk about a lot with people is that we need to be talking about abortion and our own abortion experiences, but we need to be very careful about how we do that, because we don't know who around us has had an abortion or been affected by one. One of the things that I hear among Christian circles in particular is people will say, I don't know how anyone could